welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 58, where we are talking about sailing around the Caribbean being the best Euro privateer you can be, Maracaibo from Capstone Games. And we are very excited to get to that review in just a few minutes. But before we do, we will start, as we always do, with the news. And the news this week is brought to us, as it always is, by tablefor1.me. If you haven't checked out that website, you definitely should. It's a great resource for people who like solo games and want to keep up with what's going on in the world of new releases and all of that. So check that out when you get a chance. And the first bit of news that we have this week is actually not from tablefor1.me, but definitely something you should check out. A listener hit me up and told me about a new game on Kickstarter called Ulaya Chronicles. This is a solo/co-op wargaming miniatures game set in the Drowned Earth universe, which I don't really know anything about, but looks interesting, kind of a post-apocalyptic/prehistoric setting.
Okay.
Yeah, so miniatures game about fighting dinosaurs that are controlled by an AI deck. Dinosaurs, right?
Right.
That alone piques my interest. But what's also really cool about this, I was actually checking out the Kickstarter page earlier today. This is such a good move by this company that they have a miniatures version of the game, obviously, because it is a miniatures game. But they have a standee-only version as well, and that is $49.
Man.
Which is like unheard of on Kickstarter nowadays.
Right, yeah.
Really cool. So I just think more companies should probably be doing stuff like this. So, if you have always wondered about checking out a tabletop miniatures game, especially one for solo play, but price of entry has just always been too high, check this out, because $49 and dinosaurs.
Right. But so is it just regular dinosaurs or cyber dinosaurs?
They look like regular dinosaurs in most of the pictures that I saw. But if there's not some cyber dinosaurs, that would be a missed opportunity, right?
Right, cyber dinos.
Yeah, you gotta have the cyber dinos. So check out Ulaya Chronicles now. Our second bit of news for this week is Ink Railroad Challenge has been announced from Horrible Games. Ink Railroad, if you're not familiar with it, it was a set of 2 roll and write games that came out last year where you rolled dice and basically the dice would show you different track formations that you had to draw on a board for yourself, and like train tracks and that sort of thing.
Do you not ink them on the board?
Oh, well, it's got dry erase markers.
Okay.
So kind of.
Sure.
Well, there was a red version and a blue version, like Pokemon. And like Pokemon, there were slight differences between them.
Right.
And so I think the red version had craters and volcanoes and stuff, and the other one was, more relaxing and blue. So there were this pair of games that did very well in the roll and write kind of explosion. Now there are 2 more versions coming out, green version and yellow version.
Oh, I thought you were going to say sword and shield versions.
Oh, no. I think in the yellow version, maybe a Pikachu follows you around the entire time.
Right, yeah.
They look really cool. Apparently, they add competition for universal goals, which maybe the original didn't have. A lot of people really love this. We've not actually had a chance to play it yet. But, I do think they look really cool. So if you're into roll and writes and you want another one in your collection, check out Ink Railroad Challenge, which is coming out a little later this year. And our last bit of news this week is similar to the last episode we did. It's just that more companies are announcing solo modes for existing games because of the COVID-19 quarantine. So if you're listening to this in the future, this was recorded during that strange, bizarro, awful time where we all had to stay indoors, but our people were actually better prepared than most. So a lot of companies are trying to capitalize on this. And well, that's maybe the cynical way of looking at it. They're doing a nice thing and putting out solo modes for us. And we've got a few new ones this week. So Deep Blue from Days of Wonder, which is a game that came out and then didn't get much buzz at all. In fact, I think it was kind of panned by most critics as just being kind of an average Days of Wonder game. But, a lot of people bought it, I bet, because it's a Days of Wonder game.
Right.
And so they've now added official solo rules for it.
Does it have super intelligent killer sharks in it?
I don't think so, which, again, what a missed opportunity.
Right.
If you could play as LL Cool J,
right.
That would really make the whole experience. So if you have Deep Blue and are interested in playing that solo, I bet it would be worth checking out, because I own a copy of 5 Tribes, and Days of Wonder a couple of years ago, or maybe last year, released official solo rules for that. And that was pretty good. So we haven't reviewed that on the show or anything, but they did a good job with that. I expect they did with this one too. Another new solo mode that was announced actually today, the day of this recording, was a solo mode for Adrenaline from Czech Games Edition, which is the first-person shooter arena combat game that came out from them, I don't know, a couple of years ago now has a solo mode. Like the solo mode DLC is what they're calling it, which is clever. So if you've got that, it's supposedly compatible with the expansion that's out as well. So check that out, the solo mode for Adrenaline. And finally, Atomic Mass Games has announced a solo mode for Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is the Marvel tabletop miniatures game that they came out with this year, which I want so badly.
Of course you do.
I want it so badly because the models are awesome and I want to paint them. I mean, I didn't get it because nobody's going to play this game with me.
Yeah.
You're dying to play it, aren't you?
Yeah.
I can see it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'm probably not going to pick this up, but the fact that they do have a solo mode out for it, my brain is telling me that maybe, I mean, for the show, maybe I should do it for the show.
Yeah. It would be hard for you to make that sacrifice, but sure.
But I could do it for you, you, dear listener. So as I understand it, the heroes team up against Ultron for this mode, which is that's a cool idea, a cool way to spin that mode. So if you've got Marvel Crisis Protocol, but can't play with anybody right now, download the solo rules for that. I'll try to link to all of these in the show notes like I did last time, just so it's easy for you all to access. But check those out. Stay at home, stay safe, and download new rules for games you've already got. All right, that's all the news that we've got for this week. So we are going to head into the review, which is sponsored, as always, by Stone Valley Games. Stone Valley Games, man, they're so good to us. They are such an excellent company, great prices, great loyalty system, reward system, and they're just getting more and more games in stock all the time with a strong focus on solo modes. I can't say enough good things about them. They're very kind, efficient, easy to work with, great to order from, and actually they provided us with the review copy for this episode. Actually, when we first formed our partnership, they said, what games do you think people would want to hear reviews for? You know, what are you all interested in reviewing? Send us a list of 10 games that you'd like to review. So I did, of varying, price levels and complexity and all that. And Eric, who runs the store, just got right on it, ordering as many of those games as he could for us, tracking them down. He put a lot of time and effort into that for the sake of the show. And, we wouldn't be able to review games like Brass Birmingham or Maracaibo. Maracaibo's out of stock pretty much everywhere as far as I can tell, but we have a copy because of them. So major shout out to them. Great company. And if you need to buy a game, go check them out at stonevalleygames.com. Hey, one quick thing here. Sorry about the change in my audio quality, but I have loaned out my microphone since we originally recorded this. So I'm recording this on my laptop speakers, which are not great. Laptop microphone, I mean. That's how you record. My laptop microphone is not amazing, but hopefully this will be serviceable. Just wanted to let you all know we are announcing the giveaway winner for Castle Itter at the end of this episode. So be sure to stick around for that, and thank you to Stone Valley Games for sponsoring that giveaway. All right, this episode we are reviewing Maracaibo. Maracaibo was published in 2019 and comes to us from designer Alexander Pfister and publisher Capstone Games and plays 1 to 4 players. In Maracaibo, you take on the role of a privateer in the 17th century. You're going to sail on a course around the Caribbean. Pick a pronunciation and stick with it. The Caribbean, taking actions in and delivering goods to various cities in that area, completing quests and exploring the jungle, and amassing an army of crew and assistants. At the end of the game, the player with the highest score wins. That is kind of a slightly streamlined version of the description that was on Board Game Geek, but let me tell you folks, it does not begin to do justice to all the stuff that is in this game.
There is so much in this game.
Oh my. When we ran a poll for which games you all were interested in, which we ran actually right after Stone Valley formed the partnership with us, this was tied, I think, for the most requested title for us to review, which surprised me. And that's partly because I just have not played that many Alexander Pfister games. I mean, if you don't know, Alexander Pfister is famous for games like Oh My Goods and Port Royal and Mombasa, but definitely most famous for Great Western Trail, which is at number 10 on Board Game Geek. I've never played Great Western Trail or Mombasa or... I mean, the only one of his games I played is Oh My Goods.
Yeah, and I haven't played any of his games before now.
But he's had a meteoric rise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
His name is uttered alongside Uwe Rosenberg or Vital Lacerda, which means a lot to me. So when you all picked this, I was eager to give it a shot. And then when I learned that it was about, pirates...
Privateers.
I'm sorry, privateers. That was insensitive. When I learned that it was about privateers, I was very excited because privateers, didn't sail the Mediterranean, to my knowledge,
right?
Which makes me excited already.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I didn't know much about this game, but then I started hearing reviews for it that it was very good, that maybe it was his best game. And I'm skeptical of hype, but I was anxious to give it a shot. So we're very excited to be reviewing that. I'm just going to tell you, we're going to have to hit the high points with this one.
Yeah, there's a lot inside here.
Yeah, there's way too much for us to cover in a decent length episode. So we're just going to hit the high points of play and try to give you, as best we can, a sense for how the game feels to play before we head into our final thoughts for this episode. But we will start like we always do with the components for the game. And, components, Carter, what was your first impression of this game when you opened the box?
They're fine. They're not great. They're not the best you've seen. The cards aren't like the thickest stock. They don't have a linen finish. It's like cardboard pieces, like some wooden pieces, and they're all like made fine enough, but nothing like really stands out as being great. It's not like super high-end production, but there's nothing like bad or like egregious about anything of it. It's all just serviceable.
That's how I feel too. It's what I would consider to be a standard quality production for a Euro game in 2020, right?
Sure.
It's nothing that's going to blow your mind, but good production. I will say that anytime a game is set in the Caribbean, it just looks a little bit prettier. Yeah, because the colors are brighter.
Yeah, all the colors are very bright. Where in the Mediterranean, it's like they have to make it look dusty because it's antiquity.
Right. I'm so sick of that. I really am. And so I like that the board is bright and vivid. Now, I will say, this might be the busiest game I've ever seen visually.
Yeah, a lot of spaces, so many icons. Over everything that there could be icons on the board, on cards, on your player mat, just everywhere.
I set it up for the first time and, we'll talk a little bit more about setup later, but in short, it's a beast. And there are lots of like rows of little cubes at the top of the board that took forever to set up and little piles of tiles everywhere. And when it's all done finally and you look at it, it's kind of a mess at first until you know what you're looking at. It just looks like a pile of icons. That would be my only knock against the components, really, is just that it's a lot. But it's a lot because it's a big game and a complex game. And you get the sense for that as soon as you dive into the rules. The game has a lot of rules.
Yeah, there are a lot of rules, a lot of kinds of actions, and then... not only in those actions, a lot of, I guess, different like variations because of variability or different card actions or trying to understand how it all interconnects. I don't know. It can be I will say that it is very overwhelming at first.
I thought it was too. And the flow of the rulebook was good. And I think overall it worked for me. I did have to go back and look at several things. My first game, there's a lot of flipping back and forth through the rulebook. And I can't tell how much of that is a rulebook issue and how much of it is this is a heavy Euro, and so it's just going to take a while for everything to sink in. The rulebook didn't feel egregious to me or anything like that.
Right. I think the bright colors threw me off. I just thought it was going to be more of just a less heavy game. And so I wasn't expecting that, but I think it was like I got through setup and then started reading the rules beyond that, and I decided that I'm just going to look up a tutorial video because that's probably going to make this easier and I'll probably understand better.
Yeah, I would put this on par with like a Vito Lacerda game, right? In terms of its weight.
It's less so than like Lisboa.
I see, to me, it's similar weight to Lisboa. There's just a lot going on here. The only place where I felt like the rulebook really fell down was the setup instructions. Something about the way those are written just seemed very unclear in a number of areas, like how many tiles I should put out, especially quest tiles. I felt like that part was very unclear. I had to watch a couple of videos online to get a good sense of how everything was supposed to be set up. Set up my first game took me probably 40 minutes. Just trying to figure out from the rules where everything was supposed to go.
Yeah, and they refer to things, and you have to figure out what they're actually talking about and where to put. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah,
and none of it makes sense to you at first.
Right, and yeah, that's true. This game won't make sense to you until you finish your first play. Overall, the rules are fine. but the setup instructions were a little rough for me. But then that brings us to the play for the game. And when you consider how much there is going on, it really is kind of remarkable that the rulebook isn't longer than it is, because this game has more gameplay stuff going on than almost any other Euro I can think of in terms of options for play and things to consider and think about. There is a lot going on. So maybe the most helpful way for us to organize our thoughts here is just by giving you a sense for what a basic turn is like, just with a very short overview, and then talking about 3 main things that stick out to us about this game before we move on to talking about the automa and kind of the campaign aspects of it. So the basic gist of the game is this is a rondel game at its heart. It is a rondel game with multi-use cards.
Yes.
But that doesn't even begin to get at everything that's going on here.
Right. We are initially talking about it, and you said it was a rondel game. I hadn't actually even considered that because there's so much else going on. I didn't even think of it as a rondel game, but it is.
It is. It doesn't look like a typical big circular track on the board, but essentially you have a single player piece, a ship that everybody starts in the same place, but then there are a number of spots on the board where you can stop to take an action. And on your turn, what you're going to do is move between 1 and 7 spaces on this board. And it's essentially just a big loop. You're just sailing around the Caribbean. And when, you've finished the track and somebody has made it all the way to the end, the round ends and a new one starts. That's the basic gist. Wherever you stop is going to have an action or 2 or 3 that you could take, and then your turn's going to end and it's the next person's turn or the automa's turn in the case of a solo game. But to me, there are several things that stick out as really interesting and compelling about this design. The first thing is the central puzzle of moving around on the board is incredibly compelling. Just determining how many spaces to move on your turn. That has always struck me when I think about rondel games just abstractly. It doesn't seem like that interesting of a choice, right? But in this game, it will make your brain hurt, the tension that builds up trying to decide where to go, because there are 2 main kinds of spaces on the board. There are cities and there are villages. And if you stop in a city, you can deliver a good from a card in your hand in order to basically take upgrades on your ship. You start out with a player board in front of you that's a picture of a ship's deck, and it has all these little discs all over it. Whenever you remove discs from that board, you unlock more powers on your ship, and your ship becomes more powerful. So I just want to say right now, that alone, when I read that was a thing in the rulebook, I was immediately like, oh, I'm going to like this. I love the sense of growing and getting more powerful during the course of the game. This one action here just nails that perfectly.
Yes. I mean, because it feels like you're getting 2 things for the cost of 1, which feels so good.
Oh, man. We were just chatting about this earlier. One of my favorite things in a game I've decided is when, for instance, in Terra Mystica or Gaia Project, and I think this happens in Scythe as well, whenever you remove a piece from your player mat to put it out onto the central board, and it's like, hey, the game says, you get a bonus and points and resources for placing this thing on the central board. Congratulations. But also, the act of removing that thing from your board reveals something on your board that gives you more resources or income or whatever. There's something about the efficiency of moving a single piece and having it give me 2 things that just makes me so happy.
Right. Yes.
And this game does that because whenever you make a delivery to one of these city spaces, you also get to take the action of that city space,
right,
which is good for you.
Yeah, are always good actions.
Yeah, pretty powerful actions. And you're unlocking more things on your ship and getting stronger. I love it. I love that so much. I wish more Euro games would do that.
Yeah.
But what makes that so delicious is you also have the choice, instead of stopping at a city, you could stop at a village instead. And the way that village actions in this game work is you don't get to deliver something to make your ship stronger or anything like that, but they have compelling actions in their own right. And you could do possibly up to 3 of these actions, anywhere between 1 and 3. But the number that you can take is determined by the number of spaces you moved around the rondel that turn.
It's such a good tension of, obviously you don't want to just go blitzing around this thing because you want more actions per round to get more things done, score more points, things like that. But it's but then I would be way more efficient with this turn if I move through faster. And I would say the beginning kind of village actions you can take are pretty basic and simple. But then there are ways to get additional actions that you can take in the village, which just makes that an even juicier of a choice. There's ways you can do it to where you don't have to move as far. It like that can grow and shift and change. And just having that compete with this very powerful going to a city and delivering a good is just, it's agonizing, but so good.
To me, one of the main design hurdles for a Rondel game is incentivizing people to move faster around the track, because you would think, why don't I just go slower, right? The slower I go, the more actions I get. I may not get first pick at the things that I want, but I'll be able to do more actions. But here, the fact that they are like, you can move slow if you want, but the faster you move, the better your actions are and the more efficient you are in that sense. It's rewarding people for zipping around the board, but also, like you said, not zipping around so fast that you don't take the number of actions that you need to. You kind of need to keep pace with one another, but you also want to get out front and, you know, make those deliveries at cities, because once somebody has delivered to a city that's looking for the goods that you have, then nobody else can go that round.
Right.
Oh, man. Oh, that is so good. And it helps game length.
Absolutely.
That's one of the most brilliant things about it is like this game, any Rondel game really, is in danger of just dragging out and becoming interminable. But incentivizing speed means that that's not going to happen.
Right.
Oh, man. That decision to stop and upgrade at a city or to go to a village is just delicious.
Yeah. I think for like some of those city actions that you can take, that might be the only way you can do whatever action it allows for. And so you want to make sure you are the person who can get there. And you can really make a blitz for it, but you're sacrificing actions. But then it's like you don't want someone else to take it from you. It's so good. And there's actually one more action you can do, and that's picking up quests. And so once again, there are these quest tokens that you can get, which once again are paid with resources from your cards, these kind of multi-use resource cards. And those are, there's not a lot of them. They have pretty nice rewards. And if someone gets to it before you, then they get it. And so it's just once again, like, how am I really going to take my time? Or do I just need to go ahead and rush to get to it? It's such a good tension.
I love everything about it. And then, of course, there's the extra incentive to keep going faster around the board, because at the end of the track, you know, the first person to reach the end of the track is going to get more points than the second or third person to reach the end of the track. Also excellent. What a great design choice. So even if there was nothing else in this game compelling, the central Rondel mechanism on the board is so good. And like the balance between getting those village actions and upgrading your ship by visiting cities, so good. But then on top of that, the second thing that stands out to me is multi-use cards. I love multi-use cards. I love them pretty much any game that they're in. I love them. And here, they're so good. They're so good because you've got the option of basically buying the cards in your hand. Like, you're going to start with a hand of 8 cards, draw 8 cards, hang on to 5 of them, I think, at the beginning of the game.
It's like 4, I think, of them total, yeah.
Which is an awful decision right off the bat. Like, awful in a good way, right? All the tension of deciding what you want to do. But then you have to figure out ways to pay for them because money is extremely tight in this game. And some of these cards are also going to demand that you pay crew, which you need for a number of other things in the game. They're essentially another currency that are also very tight and hard to come by.
Yes.
So just the tension of which cards do I keep in my hand, just project use, like paying to put them down and get their abilities. And the abilities are so powerful.
Right. Using the cards for what's printed on them is very much this engine building thing. You're going to make your actions way more powerful. You're going to increase your ability to get income, victory points, all sorts of things. All of the good engine building type things you love in a game. But, you know, they have those resources on them they'll have actually 2 different types of resources. One for making deliveries in cities and one for completing quests. And you've got to manage, is it more important for me to pay the resource on this card so I can complete whatever? Or is the project that's on it that I can pay for with regular money and build, is that going to be more beneficial long term? It's just such a hard, good choice with every part of it.
Printing resources on the cards also, instead of just associating certain resources with certain spaces on the board, was such a good design decision because I mean, the tension of, do I play this for the resources or do I play it for the project, is excruciating. And on top of that, at the end of your turn, when it's time to draw new cards, and you can bump up your hand limit from unlocking things on your ship, right? Which feels extremely powerful because it gives you more flexibility. But when you're drawing up to that hand limit at the end of your turn, you have the option of just drawing blindly from the top of the card deck, which is rough because you really want control over which resources you get. Or you can get one of the face-up cards next to the pile, but you're going to have to pay a doubloon for it. Doubloons are so tight, but also, do you really want to risk not getting the projects or, more importantly, the resources that you need for this next turn? I love that choice.
Yes.
That choice of which cards to keep and which cards to build and how you build out an engine. You are definitely building out a long-term strategy with these cards. That would be probably too much. It's too much to put on the player unless you give them some guidance. But right at the beginning of the game, you're going to get 2 career cards dealt to you, and you get to pick one to keep. And that's going to give you some guidance for what your strategy should be for this particular game.
Right.
And so that gives you, I think, just the perfect amount of guidance for helping you choose which cards you want to keep and, how you want to build out your engine, that it just works perfectly.
Yeah. It's just enough flexibility, but with the guidance of that. And it's not one of those things that, I would say for the first half of the game, there's some wiggle room for you to kind of shift how you're building out. It's not like some games which really kind of funnel you towards a specific play style. There's enough systems going on that it's okay, I'm going to kind of play in this area. And This is what I'm going to prioritize. So it's very well balanced.
That's actually the third major thing that I would say about this game is the number of paths to victory in this game, the number of areas for you to focus on is unbelievable to me. And that's just talking about the kind of base vanilla default setting for this game. And we'll get into that more in just a little bit. But you can go exploring through the jungle. And there's this whole little path that you can cut your way through the jungle that's similar to the Rondel in that, as you upgrade your ship or get new assistants or whatever, you can move further and further in the jungle on a turn. But every space where you could stop on your track through the jungle gives you rewards. And you have this choice that comes up over and over again of do I go as far as I can into the jungle? Because the further that I progress, the more points I'm going to get at the end of the game. But maybe the reward is not as good on that furthest space that you can move this turn. So maybe you're incentivized to move only 2 of your 3 movement through the jungle this turn, because the reward is better for stopping early. It's excruciating to make that choice, but the good kind.
Yeah. And there'll be little split paths, and one will be shorter than the other. But the long path will have much better rewards on it.
Oh, man. You can focus on the jungle. You can focus on completing quests. You can focus on combat.
Right. Fighting for one of the 3 European powers that are trying to exert their influence over the Caribbean.
Which I think is a really nice kind of thematic touch. I would not say that this is a highly thematic game, right? But the fact that you can choose to, when it's convenient for you, fight for Spain or France or England, I guess, depending on, how it works out best for you. That's very privateering, and I like that choice a lot. And the combat in this game is not roll a bunch of dice and see what happens. It is spending, basically, arms as a resource.
Right.
To make this combat happen. And I thought that worked really well.
It worked really well, and the way they do it with the little tokens or the tiles that you have, it tells you what benefit you'll get or what your attack power will be for which country you choose to fight for that time. But also it'll have this varying thing that, well, if you choose the most powerful nation, you're going to have less power. There'll be another tile that says if you choose the weakest nation, then you'll get extra power. And having that extra attack power means that you get to spend more of that for resources, influence, whatever. It is a currency for that moment, and it is a hard choice. And then also just the more you fight for one country in particular, the more points and favor you're going to get with that country, which translates to more points. You can really go in deep for this aspect of the game if you wanted to.
Yeah, I think that's so good. And for me, this doesn't begin to cover everything, right? But the bottom line as far as the gameplay and the core game is it has all the freedom to choose what kind of path to victory you want to take that you would find in a sandbox style game. But the economy of managing your money and your cards and your movement around the board is so tight that the marriage of those two things together creates, like, for my taste anyway, the perfect Euro. I mean, this is to a T what I like in a Euro game.
Yeah, it really is.
I think the mesh of mechanisms here is just brilliant. And that's just what's in the core box. So that gives you a good sense of how the main game plays. Let's talk for a second about the Automa. I was really surprised by how simple it is to run this thing, given the complexity of the game. Basically, what you're going to do, this is a deck-based Automa system, which we've seen, 100 times before. And I generally like these quite a bit. You flip a card up, you resolve it, and then you move on with your turn. I like them because of their speed, but depending on the game that you're playing, the iconography, especially games where you have to determine placement of a thing on a central board, the instructions for how to handle things like that are usually more convoluted than I would like, even on a deck-based Automa system. Here, I thought it was really nice because the card basically tells you, here's how many spaces it's going to move. If the path in the rondelle splits, which it will occasionally do to go around an island, it'll tell you whether it takes the top path or the bottom path. And then it tells you a priority list, a very short priority list of what it wants to accomplish. That's it. It's very little effort to manage, I would say 80% of the time.
Right. It took no real extra reading or trying to understand for most of the cards. The cards that cause it to have battle or, to fight for one of the national powers, I would say that one does take some extra work to kind of wrap your mind around. But I would say after one or two times, you understand what you're supposed to be doing. And then it's fine. But yeah, in the initial run through, that was the only one that was complicated that I really had to stop and make sure I was doing it or calculating the rules correctly.
Yeah, I had a little bit of trouble with that in my first game. By the end of my first game, I didn't have any more issue with it.
Right.
And I think that most people will, that's how their experience will go. Overall, I was really impressed with the design of this because the downside for deck-based Automas is they tend to be pretty random, right? Just flipping the card without having a preview of what's coming next is not always satisfying, especially in a Euro game where you're jockeying for position and space, and that matters a lot. The great thing about this is the way that flip of the deck meshes with the core design of, how many spaces it's going to move on its turn. It's going to be able to move up to 7 spaces, right? And generally what the Automa likes to prioritize. Because of that, the card flip randomness is mitigated significantly from my perspective. In fact, it's mitigated at such a level that it really reaches that kind of perfect balance for me that I like in a solo mode where there's predictability that kind of emulates the experience of playing with someone else where generally what kind of strategy they're going for and can kind of anticipate their moves. But it's never deterministic in a multiplayer experience, right? There's always a random element. They can always surprise you. I feel like this has both. It has the drama of the card flip, but the predictability of here's the way this core system works.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's very much it's okay, it's going to move 1 or 2 spaces. So which, what of these kind of 1 or 2 spaces is going to go, or if it's going to go what side around an island or something like that. And yeah, it's one of those things that kind of like a real person, there are some obvious targets. You don't know for sure which one it's going to go for. But if you need one of those obvious targets that's within range of, the Automa or another player, you're kind of pushing your luck if you're trying to, I'll just assume they're not going to go for it. But they might, Yeah.
I found myself doing that a number of times where I would think, okay, I definitely want to make sure I get to this quest before the Automa gets there. But I really want to take this action before that if I can. And, a number of times I would be like, I'm just going to risk it. I won't play it safe and go straight for the quest. I'll risk it and take that other action first. What happens next on that next card flip, where you flip it up and you're praying to whatever god you pray to that this thing doesn't get to this quest. That is such a great, all the tension you feel there is exactly what I want in an Automa.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes that sucker will just head straight for it and it kills me watching him take the thing that I wanted. but I made that choice.
Right.
And that's what makes it feel good.
Right. Yeah. It's very much that sense of like, I knew this was a risk I was going to take.
Yeah. That's really excellent. And it has its own little Automa board, which works really well because essentially the more deliveries and things it gets to make, it uses the same brown discs that you use, but the more of them that it places out, the more points it gets. So that track just increases until it's getting an absurd number of points if you let it. But you don't have to let it. Right. You can get in its way and fight against it. And that's probably one of the things I like most in an Automa game is when I finished my first game, I played it on normal, got crushed. But I looked at what I had done, and I hadn't played optimally because it was my first game. But I also realized I hadn't played the Automa optimally. I hadn't played against them. And I don't know, for me, having that realization in a one-player game is so nice. Like realizing, I should have gotten in their way. I should have competed against them the way that I would compete against a regular player. It just doesn't always happen in these games.
Right. But very much, I also lost in my first game, and it was because, specifically did not try to stop it from getting quests. I could have a couple of times, but I didn't, and I paid the price.
Yep. Yeah, I really, really love that about this game. So super clever Automa design. I wouldn't say it's like the best one that I've ever played, but it's really high up there.
Yeah, it's not like super sophisticated, but it works really well.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it's competitive, and there are plenty of ways to tweak the difficulty. So that all works well. Last thing that sticks out to me about this game that we've got to mention in this review, if what we have already discussed was all that came in the box, the amount of replayability in this game would already be through the roof because there are so many cards.
There's so many cards. The deck is going to be different every time you play because you're only taking like 40 cards out of like 100-ish or something for one of the decks.
It's wild.
And then just the city tiles are going to vary and change. And so where the actions are also, there's lots of great variability just baked in.
But then on top of that, this game contains a campaign. It's not heavy on story, right? But it does give your games context, and it gives you a changing set of goals over multiple games. It is a big, robust campaign. And that kind of boggles my mind because there's already so much variability as it is. And then as you're playing this campaign, you actually unlock different tiles that you place out on the board that change different action spaces or add new action spaces to the board. It is mind-boggling how many plays you could get out of this game that would feel very different from one another. And it would take about 12 games, it looks like, to finish this campaign.
Right, according to the designer. That's what he says.
But if you played it again, it could play out differently, right? Because, the variety that's just on the board would make this a game that I would play through the campaign multiple times. I could foresee that happening if you really like this game. The other thing is, it's designed in such a way that, let's say you play this mostly solo, but then you have game night and you have people over. It's not a problem to add or drop players from the campaign the way it's set up, which is so brilliant.
Yes.
I love the idea of campaigns. And obviously lots of people do because games that hit Kickstarter that have campaigns consistently do pretty well. I also have a sense too that people are a little campaigned out because so many games have them nowadays. People are starting to realize like, I don't actually need another game that has a campaign in it.
Right. Another long, like multi-month probably just commitment with your friend group or game group.
Yeah. And the choice to say, okay, people can drop in or out is so good because even for a solo player, right? Like you don't have the problem necessarily of getting people together to play through the campaign. But also, like for Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth, that's a good example of one. If I'm 5 or 6 sessions deep in that game, and then we have a game night and somebody wants to play it, I'm kind of like, I don't really want to start back at scenario 1, but also it doesn't make sense for you to jump in the middle either. And there's not an easy way to accommodate more people. This is so good because if you're somebody who plays solo most of the time, but then you do have a game night, don't worry about it. You can play with the stuff that you've added, although that might be overwhelming for somebody else who hasn't been playing, but you can do it, which is really nice. And the game is fully functional and hugely robust, even if you never touch the campaign in the game.
And that is one thing I really like about it is, this isn't obviously like a legacy game, but that's they talk about like, oh, you can play the legacy game, and then when you finish, you have your own unique board that you can play and blah, 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 whatever. And it's like, no, like this is just a really good, rock solid game. And you can play this kind of drawn out campaign with you that you have in it. Or you could just only play the core game and you would be getting 100% your money's worth.
Yeah. In fact, I would say I cannot believe how much content comes in the core box.
Yeah.
It honestly feels like a game plus 2 expansions worth of content.
It's so good.
It's so good. It is the most game I think I've ever seen in a Euro game box that wasn't a legacy game or something like that. I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of content in the base game box. Now, the base game, the MSRP is like $74.99.
Somewhat on the higher side.
It is on the higher side, especially given the quality of the components being just standard level. Mm-hmm. But this is a perfect example of what I would like to pay for when I buy a game. There are plenty of games that have great components, but the replayability is okay at best. This is just, I mean, $75 and you've got a ton of game. Mm-hmm. And all of that campaign is compatible with solo play. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what more we could or should say about how the game plays and what's in the box. That gives you a pretty good idea without us spoiling anything about the story. I mean, the story such as it is, right? You don't buy the game for the story, but it is entertaining. Let's go ahead and start by talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. There's a lot of good, right?
Yeah, a whole lot of good.
Yeah. I mean, like almost entirely.
Yeah, just lots of just hard, crunchy choices. I mean, just, you want to do 5 things, you only have 2 actions, kind of thing. And I love games like that. I love card-driven games where multi-use cards, like, it's just all of it is just hard choices with no clear answers.
Yep. I think I've decided that cards are my favorite game component. I just love the feel of cards. I love the feel of drawing a hand of cards and exploring the possibilities that exist in that hand and trying to figure out what to do with it. But when you make those cards do multiple things, I'm just sold. And for me, like the combination of tight economy plus sandbox style, pick your path, do what you want to do, but also here's some direction for you. All that's excellent. The combination of the rondelle mechanism on the board with the multi-use cards. I'm at a loss for words for how good that combination of things is. Even the theme is a good here. Not that it's super strong or anything, but just setting it here and just making you a privateer or something instead of just a merchant. It feels more like a modern Euro than I expected. Just little tweaks like that instead of saying, you know what, we're not going to go to the Mediterranean. We're going to bring it here. And we're going to give you all your favorite Euro mechanisms and turn it up to 11.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just feels like it is iterating on a set of mechanisms and ideas that's been iterated on 100 times, but it's honed to near perfection here.
Yeah, everything in the design feels very tight, well integrated, and just a lot of good choices. I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't call this an innovative game in a lot of ways. I mean, I think the campaign thing is pretty innovative.
Right. But yeah, there's nothing like really innovative. There's nothing that you've never seen before, but it's just such a good synthesis of things that you know and like in other classic Euro games.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. And I guess the Automa design would go here for me as well. I think the Automa design is really good, very streamlined, especially considering the complexity of the game. To make an Automa this streamlined that is competitive and that has its difficulty, have tweakable difficulty is really a feat.
Yeah, I guess we didn't really talk. You build out the Automa deck slightly differently for the difficulty level you're playing, which is just it's nice in that you can make it more difficult if you like, but also your first time through, or just really, I guess, multiple playthroughs, that deck is going to look slightly different with what kind of actions is favoring. It's just a smart, simple design.
Yeah.
It just really well, it just balances really well a super streamlined Automa system that doesn't feel like just random things happening to you on the board.
Yep, absolutely agree. And I think the fact that the solo game, and I think this is true of the multiplayer game as well, but it feels competitive, it feels tight, but also there is a great sense of growth over the course of this game. What you are capable of doing at the beginning of the game and what you're capable of doing at the end the gap between those two things is tremendous. Like you were talking about a game that you played where for several turns at the beginning, you were just generating 1 victory point per turn.
And then I was generating 12 per round.
Per round. Which is awesome. Like that feels so good.
Felt good. And I got it all at once,
Yeah. I mean, a game where you are trading and delivering, it should make you feel like you've built an empire by the time you're done. And this does a really, really good job of that. Last thing, replayability. I just feel like this game is endlessly replayable.
Yeah.
Even if it didn't have the campaign, the replayability would be very high. But the addition of the campaign, which could be played through multiple times because you're not permanently altering anything, it is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And I would want to play this multiplayer or solo. And the fact that I had the flexibility to do so, even if I'm in the middle of a campaign, is really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. It's one of those things that I would like to play this game multiplayer, but I don't feel like I'm really missing out or losing any core feel of the game by playing solo.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, just so many good things about this game. If I was going to talk about things that are bad about this game, first of all, the lack of clarity in the setup portion of the rules for me was definitely a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And just the rules, the learning curve in general.
To me, not because it was really complex rules, but just it is so many different things you have to learn about, so many icons. And I feel like it's relatively straightforward once you get it. I guess especially if you're kind of used to medium to heavy Euros. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is overwhelming and it's hard to kind of make sense of what it's all going to be or how it works together.
Yeah, absolutely. I think once you get over that hump, it's really rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot to take in up front. And
right.
Your first game is going to be pretty slow, I would say, just as you're checking things in the rule book and all that. But another thing I should have mentioned in the good, though, is that once you do get past that, they do move at a really good clip.
Right.
I was finishing mine in probably an hour or a little more, which is not bad considering the weight of this game, I would say.
Yeah, it moves at a speed that seems much faster than you would normally go for a game this weight.
But sometimes games this weight, when they move quickly, I feel like I didn't get to run my engine as much as I want to. But I didn't get that in this.
Right. No, I feel like you get the use out of your engine. It's satisfying. You get to pull off some big moves kind of into the game. But yeah, it goes at a nice clip.
But you do have to get through that first game first. Last thing I would say about in the bad category is just not just the lack of clarity for setup in the rules, but the time that it takes to set up and tear down this game. It's a beast.
Yeah. It's not ugly for me, but it is... I don't know. It is kind of a bummer.
It's bad. This is definitely a game that needs an organizer.
Yeah.
I think if some games, I think it's a little, whatever to purchase an organizer for that costs $30 or $40. In this case, it would be worth it just because that's going to be the main thing that keeps you from getting into the table, I think.
Yeah.
So, but that's not a deal breaker for me.
Yeah. It's not a deal breaker for me either, but it is a lot.
It is a lot. But I don't have anything else bad to say about this, and I definitely don't have anything ugly to say about this.
No.
Folks, this game is so good. Probably doesn't come as a shock to you, but I think that this is a stomp of approval game.
Yeah, it's gonna get the stomp this time.
Man, oh man! If you're not familiar with a stomp of approval game it's an award we give out pretty rarely. I think we've given out maybe 14 in the time that we've done the show, and this is episode 58. A game has to be really good. It has to be a game that we both really love and that we would recommend buying, even if you only ever play it solo. This is just a dream combination of things. You've got to check this game out if you like heavy Euros.
Right.
It is heavy. It
is a heavy Euro game.
But I think if you're looking for something that's going to give you a lot of bang for your buck, that isn't a $100 game. $75 isn't nothing, but nowadays with the price of games going up and up and up, $75 seems pretty reasonable now. If you bought this and it was the only game you bought for a year or 2 years, I think you'd be all right.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of mileage you can get out of this game.
Yeah.
Very good, satisfying mileage.
Man, real excellent game. Very proud to give this the stomp of approval. You got to check it out. That's Maracaibo, and you can pick this up at Stone Valley Games. So if you haven't checked them out yet, go ahead and do that because This is one worth getting. All right, that's all we've got for this episode. As we end here, we do want to announce the winner of our Castle Itter giveaway. This is me breaking in again with the bad laptop microphone. Just wanted to let you know that the winner for the Castle Itter giveaway is Joan Leonard. So congratulations to Joan. Thank you very much for listening to the show and for entering. And thank you to Stone Valley Games for sponsoring that giveaway. If you didn't win this time, don't worry about it. We'll be running another giveaway in the near future, so stick around for that. So congratulations on winning a copy of Castle Itter for yourself. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. If you haven't checked out the Dice Tower Network yet, you definitely should. There are a lot of other shows in that network, which we are proud to be part of. And you can go onto Dicetower.com and find a whole list of shows out there about board games that are covered from all different kinds of angles. So check that out and find another show or two that you really love there. If you haven't followed us on Facebook or Instagram yet, you definitely should. I now, in addition to posting mediocre photos of games, occasionally post pictures of me playing games with my kids. And they're pretty cute. So we really spice it up around here, you know? So check that out when you get a chance. Our Instagram handle is @Solosauruspodcast. You can email us if you want. We have an email address. It's solosauruspodcast@gmail.com. We're happy to hear your comments about the show, or if you're a publisher or designer and have a game that you would like us to review, send us a message. We'd be happy to talk with you about it. I will give you a heads up because we have gotten several messages recently. We do only review published games. We don't do prototypes. We don't do Kickstarter previews or anything like that. If you've got something you'd like us to mention in the news portion, we can do that. But otherwise, we would be happy to talk to you about your published game with a solo mode. So give us a message about that, or just tell us, what you like about the show or what we should change or whatever. Just send us a message. And that is all we've got for this episode, folks. Thanks so much for listening to us. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.